So this is a 006. This is a typical site running along the ridge line at about 400 meters above sea level. This is you know, where the lantana likes to grow, in amongst all of the runoff from the hill country down into these areas. So you start to get a good idea of how it then prospers downslope and downstream through all the wet corridors, and you end up with massive infestations right on these areas with good access to water. Every time it gets 25 millimeters of water, it reseeds and reflowers, and goes over and over again endlessly, and this drops straight into the water table running off the edges of the drainage, and then just floods down through the rainforest and important environmentally significant areas. But that's what you face, and you see how healthy it is with this much water that it gets in this sort of location. So there's a lot of areas like this that need to be understood of how far these travel downstream, you know, down to the floor off the range country and into the streams at the bottoms of the rainforests, and destroy everything else in between those locations. So it just gives you a bit more of an idea of how this system works and how the ridge lines work, how important they are to not be allowed to become infested in the first place, and then to make sure they stay clean. Anyway, that's just a little snippet there. So as we get higher and further into the national parks, you start to see more and more of the weeds situation following the watercourse sheds, and the strength of the material in each of these areas as they spill over the edges, and these materials really take hold in major infestations. The infestations just get larger and more dramatic in the quality of the materials. Everywhere you go, right, I'm of Indigenous heritage, and I have no equal in the world in Lantana, Camara, after 40 plus years of permanent eradication. Where you go along and you look for any wildlife signs of anything going in underneath the lantana, it doesn't matter where you go, it just doesn't exist. There's no tracks, no disturbance to the leaf litter ever in these things, and it just continues. It just works to a principle that once it gets to stage 2 and stage 3 levels of infestation, and it turns and goes vertical, then there's nothing gets through it, and nothing gets into it, and nothing bothers with it. There's no sunlight, doesn't get properly to the ground ever again, and it just continues to deteriorate the entire ecosystem. And from there it seeds downstream so strongly that these type of plants in these environments are putting out anything around 6,000 new plants for a single plant growing on a ridgeline like this. And as you can see here, the road looks perfectly dry, but you can see how the constant waterfall, being a wetland rainforest type area, just keeps a high rainfall for these plants. And that's why they specifically like to get to where the water sheds off the edge of the road, and it just forms down through these things and just creates these massive rafts of material working their way down through the rainforest. And then they join up with cockspur and other different vine groups, and they climb to the canopy of the tree. And then you soon find that the wind sailing that much weight backwards and forwards busts the canopy out, and then it drops the sunlight into those areas, and the lantana that was coming up from ground level with those other materials then suddenly goes vertical and starts to climb incredibly fast into the canopy of the trees with the vine groups. And that exacerbates those things. And you know, up here you see at least 4 or 5 of its best friends just all moving downstream with it. It's just a terrible, terrible tragedy to see how these things deteriorate, and how where you see in other areas you see animal trails, and then they hit the lantana where they would have originally gone through, and they're now just, they're dead and they're had it. They don't continue through those areas. But it's all about water with Lantana Camara. It is the most important part. It can not worry so much about the soil quality. It's more interested in access to the water to get keep growing. These tobacco plants will be 30 to 40 feet tall. Some of them are getting closer to 40 feet tall in these areas. So you look at the size of these things throwing their seeds downstream, and then you've got the prickly apple and whatnot in amongst it. So you got all sorts of different weeds groups travel now with the Lantana Camara as a group. Wild tobacco, that spiky apple loves it. They all travel as one, and they particularly like to catch up with cockspur, and then they use that to climb even faster up into the trees, and that exacerbates the canopy fires even quicker. So with massive rafts like this is why we lose these rainforests nowadays, and we're creating history in rainforests catching fire. Just to give you a little looky. This is an area where there's a trail comes off and goes down through here. It's a horse riding access, which you can see has been overgrown and nothing done with it for a very, very, very long time. And it's quite interesting to see the scale of the Lantana on the outside of this break here. It's an incredible looking thing here. Quite interesting to see the scale of all of this. But this is about a kilometre square area of Lantana from this is about 616 metres elevation on the western face of the range, flowing back down from the lookout through this area. And that's just as far as I've come in this area here. That's not how far this Lantana continues to expand along this ridge line. That's just the area I'm standing in, and it's absolutely staggering, the scale of it. When you look way up there, as far as you can see and as high as you can see, it's all just full of it. And across the road, continuing up to the top of the range, exactly the same sort of outlook. So it's quite interesting to see how they allowed these things to get this bad. And then this is what you don't understand when these bushfires come through with this much Lantana at ground level, how they turn it all into a huge canopy fire and just destroy the entire ecosystems, and nothing escapes it. So none of you get to see this from your Debra homes or your Dundas homes as it flows into the rainforest and into the creeks, all rainforest down through there, into the creeks, and then just continues its way down. For up to 2,000 kilometres it's on record for. So incredible. And it's illegal to release it into the environment. Can anybody see how they're stopping it from being released into the environment? How they're managing it at all? How they're dealing with the expansion rate of the material? Or the cost of the expansion rate? Or the fact that it's flooding across everybody else's property? Can anybody see how or where they've attempted to do anything with it or done anything with it? No, it's a mind-blowing situation to look at, that's for sure. So many different places through the ranges and range country that you go through in the rainforest, and you see, you know, sites like this of complete floods flowing down the roads and down the mountainsides in really, really difficult terrain in very environmentally sensitive and environmentally important areas with such massive amounts of growth and seeding, because the amount of water that flows down these catchment areas is so strong. You start to see how strong these things get on the edges of the roadways. You know, there are so many billions of dollars you could save the state government and national parks and TMR by doing these things correctly and taking out strategic areas of these materials. But denial of their responsibilities is the name of the game. This goes up for miles up here, directly up this ravine, and all it is a continuous carpet of lantana as far up there and steep as you can see, all the way to the top. Just incredible that they can allow these sorts of levels of infestations in such water-rich environments. Goes to prove the lack of knowledge within these departments about the actual material itself and the things that the material likes, or the things that the material really responds well to. That's why I always keep saying, you know, I look at places where they've got it like this is a perfect environment of this, and you look at it and you go, how the hell did you ever think you could possibly leave these materials growing halfway down a mountainside in this sort of country, and then at the top where it came off the road at the top, and then where it jumps the road, as the road cuts back in down here in the rainforest. And they just have completely let it go, heading down to private lands at the bottom of the mountain ranges. It's no wonder there's such a battle, you know, on my side of it, trying to get people to realise how far the material has actually travelled to infest their neighbourhoods and their communities, and the actual cost of what they are releasing into the environment up here and destroying the environment. The amount of dead trees up in all of these canopies up here, when you actually stop and you actually start to look at the trees, and you see about at least every 20 trees, there would be at least 5 of them are dead. And that's a lot of trees, I'm telling you now, because there's a lot of trees up there. And then you start to get some of the scales of some of these trees, and it just really starts to take off. And the amount of other species of trees that are actually really dying back in their leaves, showing the same sides as what the hardwood forestry did. So I dare say that this lantana dieback in these trees is a lot worse across a lot more species than has been let on now. But they've pulled all funding or all research into all sorts of things, because, you know, there's no point in them knowing any more than that, because if the public says they have to go after it and try and fix it, they're going to have to spend serious money, and then they'll probably have to admit they made some huge mistakes in illegal operations. But anyway, this is just giving you some more ideas of the different areas that this is at. Anyway, we'll keep trucking on. It's been a very, very long time since you could get through the national park through here. It's just been left to be destroyed when the fires come through, with the scale of the Lantana Camara. As far as you can see down through there at 20 feet tall, and all the way through here to where it's touching the tips. Just a horrific scale of destruction, and willful destruction. Death in the trees. Just horrible to see what they've been allowed to do, and how far these materials flush downstream, destroying everything. As far as you can see, that's the last kilometres like this. Absolutely horrific to witness.